It's interesting. They have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay.
And the left,
Yes.
you know, decries you, and then the left likes you when you say something bad about Trump.
And this is one of our big problems, is that we're all in our bubbles. We are all in our media bubbles, and so many people just want to hear coming back to them what they already believe in an echo chamber. You mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish pals who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson?
Bill Maher just dropped the mic and the internet is exploding. After weeks of being dragged by the left for daring to meet with Donald Trump, Maher finally fired back. But listen to this. In a savage, no-holds-barred monologue, the legendary comedian torched his critics for their hypocrisy, performative progressivism, and growing intolerance of open dialogue. This wasn't merely a response. It was a roast that left scorch marks. And yes, we've queued up every blistering second for you, so strap in, grab the popcorn, and let's roll the clips.
So I'm going to call it out wherever I see it. I mean, there are things that have to do with, you know, gender and race and free speech and just ideas about, you know, you can be healthy at any weight, and gender is always a social construct, and maybe we should give communism another try, and maybe we should get rid of capitalism and the border patrol, and let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, you know, no. It's not that I've gotten old, it's that your ideas are stupid, okay?
Well, common sense is still common sense.
Yes, common sense is common sense, and I'm going to call it out wherever it is on the spectrum.
Bill Maher's opening salvo landed squarely on the far-left hardliners, the very crowd screeching that he'd betrayed the cause by daring to sit down with their arch-nemesis, Donald Trump. Instead of groveling or coughing up some half-baked apology, Maher counterpunched with cold, hard reality. Their pet policies have drifted so far from common sense, they're practically orbiting Pluto. But that's not all. He shredded the ideological purity tests, the cancel culture mob mentality, and the suffocating groupthink now choking the so-called progressive wing, direct, unapologetic, devastating. You could practically hear the echo chamber inhale in unison. These activists were bracing for a kumbaya moment, a warm reaffirmation of the progressive pact. What they got instead was a verbal flamethrower powered by receipts and relentless logic. The takedown was swift, brutal, and long overdue.
Well, I think the basis of it is we started to hate each other. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish pals who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson? It just would never happen. When you hate people, you don't listen to them. So it doesn't matter how reasonable they might be.
Yeah, I'm with Maher on this one. Polarization cuts both ways, sure, but the left's flavor is downright exhausting. The ideological rigidity, it's edging into full-on cult territory. Remember when certain progressive women proudly vowed they wouldn't date anyone who'd pulled the lever for Trump? That's not activism. That's turning Tinder into a tribal purity test. But it gets crazier. Just a few weeks back, I showed you that viral clip of a bride-to-be canceling her entire wedding. Yep, venue deposits and all, because her fiancé didn't shout loud enough about LGBTQ rights or Black Lives Matter. He didn't oppose them, he just wasn't performatively passionate, and that alone made him problematic. At this point, we're not talking politics anymore. We're staring at moral absolutism, masquerading as virtue.
They're wrong. I mean, they're wrong, and the kids are crazy. It's interesting. They have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay. I heard a couple of people say, or maybe they wrote it online, that, well, I'm a hypocrite because you were for the demonstrators in 1968 or whatever it was when they were demonstrating against the Vietnam War. Yeah, that was very different. First of all, the students weren't against their own. These students were threatening other students. That didn't happen in the Vietnam War. And being against the Vietnam War made sense. It was a war that we probably should not have been in.
But let me ask you,
this is demonstrating and protesting for a terrorist group. I mean, Hamas is.
Well, to be fair, a lot of students aren't doing that. There are a lot of outside, people have mixed together.
Comparing the Vietnam War to the current situation in Palestine is like comparing apples to hand grenades. The two just don't match up. It's surprising how some people don't see the difference. The Vietnam War was widely seen as a misguided conflict that America had no business engaging in. So when Maher supported the anti-war demonstrators back then, it was a clear stand against unnecessary interventionism. Today, however, we're dealing with Hamas, a group that has been responsible for attacks targeting civilians in Israel. Yet, some people expect Maher to support them or endorse that violence. When he doesn't, they quickly label him a hypocrite. That's not principled activism. It's frustration over his refusal to echo their narrative.
Well, I've been moaning and railing about that on my show because I tore Merrick Garland a new one a couple of weeks ago because I think the Democrats blew it, as they always do with this kind of stuff, because they've had 4 years. What was all the delay about? Why are we coming to the end? Of course they're going to try to run out the clock, and they did. And so if this is the only one, the one they probably shouldn't have brought anyway, or if they did, it was really a election law violation trial that should have been tried nationally on a federal level, and it wound up to be falsifying business records on the state level. So it's already in the wrong court. And why didn't Garland bring this earlier federally? Or why aren't any of these being wrapped up in 4 years? It's just so ridiculous.
Bill Maher didn't just speak his mind. He aimed a blowtorch at the Democratic Party and pulled the trigger. For months, party insiders have tried to pin their electoral bruises on him, whining that his refusal to parrot the party line undermines turnout and alienates the base. Maher's answer? A flat-out no-nonsense reality check. Their own arrogance, not his truth-telling, shoved voters into the opposing camp. But listen to this. He reminded them, loudly, that tone-deaf policies and a chronic habit of ignoring everyday Americans are what tank elections, not a comedian's monologue. Maher didn't cost them votes, their extremism did. All he's ever done is hold up a mirror, and they hate the reflection so much they'd rather smash the glass than fix the mess. When the left starts eating its own, he warned, the only winners are the very people they claim to be fighting. Even when his old pal Larry David took a swipe at him for dining with Trump, Maher fired right back. Because if there's one thing he won't do, it's apologize for calling out hypocrisy, no matter where it lurks.
Nobody has been harder about and more prescient, I must say, about Donald Trump than me. I don't need to be lectured on who Donald Trump is. Just to use the Hitler thing, first of all, I just think it's kind of insulting to 6 million dead Jews, that should kind of be in its own place in history. And, I know people can say, well, we're just comparing it in this way. Well, it's an argument you kind of lost just to start it.
Comparing anyone to Hitler isn't just reckless. It's a slap in the face to history itself. Adolf Hitler stands alone for the industrial-scale evil he unleashed. The Holocaust and the devastation of World War II have no modern political equivalent, no matter how controversial today's figures might be. But here's the thing. Tossing that analogy around so casually cheapens the suffering of millions and dilutes the gravity of what actually happened. Bill Maher called out Larry David's swipe for exactly what it was: lazy, emotion-driven, and utterly devoid of intellectual honesty. If David had an axe to grind, Maher argued, he should have swung it at a more fitting target. Because this wasn't critique, it was character assassination, dressed up as moral outrage. And Maher wasn't about to let it slide.
This is why, I really feel like one of the themes of the book is, and in my show all the time, I'm just saying, you can hate Trump, you can't hate everybody who likes him. It's half the country, okay? And I mean, look, no one was harder on Trump or will be harder on Trump, and I think I was out front on predicting he was not going to leave office. But you can't change people's minds like that. Sometimes they just like a guy, and I also concede that there are so much goofiness also on the left,
right,
that I do understand why people go, yeah, Trump is crazy and we don't really like him, but you know what? What you're selling scares me even more.
It's honestly both disheartening and maddening that the contemporary left still can't admit its missteps, let alone chart a new course. Bill Maher has long branded himself a normie, a political centrist with liberal leanings. For years, he wore the liberal label like a badge of honor. But lately, he claims he barely recognizes today's progressive movement. So he's nudged himself toward the middle. But listen to this. Plenty of people, myself included, suspect he's drifting farther right than he lets on. Maher once eviscerated conservatives with zero hesitation, but these days his barbs toward the right feel muted while his sharpest arrows fly at the left. Some argue he's just cleaning house, challenging his own tribe to save it from itself. Yet others see a clear ideological migration. His compass keeps pointing rightward. If the pattern holds, it may not be long before Maher lands fully in conservative territory, not because he's pledging loyalty, but because, in his view, the left walked away from him first.
And the left,
Yes.
you know, decries you, and then the left likes you when you say something bad about Trump.
And this is one of our big problems, is that we're all in our bubbles. We are all in our media bubbles, and so many people just want to hear coming back to them what they already believe in an echo chamber.
Most America is in the center, but you don't see that in the media.
You rarely catch this kind of honesty in mainstream media anymore, and there's a reason for that. The press is split into partisan camps, with many marquee outlets hitching themselves to the Democratic wagon. Gone is any pretense of balance or nuance. In its place, we get nonstop applause for political allies and a steady barrage of overblown criticism for the opposition. But listen to this. When Anderson Cooper dared to acknowledge the problem, it landed like a thunderclap precisely because CNN has been one of the worst offenders. From the moment Donald Trump descended that golden escalator in 2015, the network operated more like an anti-Trump war room than a newsroom. Objectivity was swapped for outrage, and journalism morphed into activism. Even Bill Maher has had to call them out for it on his show.
You were on Stephen Colbert's show, and he said something like, you guys at CNN just report the news straight. And the crowd burst into laughter. Look, I'm on CNN now. I guess we're on it right now. I mean, they show this show the next night. I don't know how we get away with it with all the but they do.
If Anderson Cooper is finally owning up to CNN's part in the mess, consider it a reckoning that's been years in the making. And maybe, just maybe, the first hint that even the most entrenched media voices are starting to question the monster they helped build. Yet, let's be real, as long as Donald Trump remains a political force, truly even-hand coverage from CNN, MSNBC, or any of their ideological cousins is wishful thinking. I think their hostility toward him runs deeper than mere partisanship. They didn't just oppose him after Inauguration Day, they pre-hated him months before a single policy was rolled out. But that's not all. The disdain has only intensified. Headlines, chyrons, and roundtable segments are meticulously framed with an anti-Trump slant, turning reportage into narrative crafting. Facts get twisted, context disappears, and buzzy trigger words keep audiences locked in a perpetual cycle of fear and outrage. At this stage, it isn't journalism, it's an ideological echo chamber masquerading as news. So maybe Bill Maher isn't drifting right at all. Maybe he's standing in place while the left stampedes toward the fringe. His trademark bluntness, once cheered, now scandalizes the same crowd that used to applaud him. He'll torch hypocrisy wherever he finds it, even if it means torching old alliances. The legacy media might ignore that truth and critics might howl, but Maher's message is crystal clear. Reality doesn't wear a party jersey. And as long as outrage mobs keep dictating the narrative, voices that are unfiltered, fearless, and inconvenient will remain not just useful, but absolutely essential. That's a wrap for today's video. If you found value in this breakdown, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more straight shooting content. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.